My parents treated me like their personal maid for 32 years. One day before Christmas, my mother threw a stained apron at my face and smirked, telling me to cook and clean for my sister's white husband and his 28 corporate guests. Then stay out of sight. I just smiled, set down my phone where I had just approved a $75 million acquisition, and calmly walked out the door to catch a first-class flight to Florida. When they saw the empty kitchen, the real nightmare began. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to remind your toxic family exactly who holds the power. Put this on and get to work. Nia, my mother, Vivian snapped, tossing a worn floral print apron directly at my face. It hit my cheek and fluttered to the cold marble island of her pristine Atlanta kitchen. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I simply lowered my gaze back to the glowing screen of my phone. There will be 28 people arriving tomorrow night. My mother continued, her voice dripping with that particular brand of Southern condescension she usually reserved for the waitstaff at her exclusive country club. Your sister Chloe and her husband Bradley are hosting his boss and the entire executive board for a crucial Christmas Eve dinner. You are going to prepare the crown roast of lamb scrub, the hardwood floors in the formal dining room until I can see my reflection, and then you are going to stay out of the way in the basement. I will not have you wandering around looking like a worn-out worker bee while Bradley is trying to secure a life-changing promotion. My thumb hovered over a highly confidential digital contract on my screen. While my mother lectured me about peeling potatoes and staying hidden, I was silently reviewing the final terms of a hostile takeover. A massive acquisition of the exact commercial real estate firm, where my precious white brother-in-law Bradley worked as a mid-level regional director. The same firm he was desperately trying to impress tomorrow night. My mother had absolutely no idea that the anonymous buyer, the majority shareholder and founder of the Apex Luxe hospitality empire they were all so eager to please, was sitting at their kitchen island being ordered to mop their floors. I slowly looked up from my screen, taking in the woman who birthed me. My mother stood there in a tailored luxury knit suit, her hair perfectly pressed and styled. She wore her large pearl necklace and a heavy diamond cross pendant, looking every bit the devout high society church lady she pretended to be. Every Sunday morning, she spent her entire life performing for the congregation, praying loudly in the front pew, while treating her eldest daughter like the hired help behind closed doors. She had always made it painfully clear that my darker skin and quiet, serious demeanor were a massive disappointment compared to Chloe, her lighter-skinned golden child who had supposedly elevated our family status by marrying a mediocre white man. I sat perfectly still in my custom-tailored charcoal blazer, projecting a calm, understated power that my mother was entirely too blind to recognize. She mistook my deliberate silence for submission. She thought my lack of a loud, flashy lifestyle meant a lack of purpose or financial success. She genuinely believed that because I did not flaunt designer logos or brag endlessly at Sunday service, I was nothing more than a glorified secretary who needed to earn her keep by serving her sister and her sister's important guests. "Did you hear me, Nia?" she demanded, slamming her manicured hand on the granite counter. "Bradley's boss is a very powerful man in the corporate world. They are trying to merge with a gigantic hospitality buyer next week. Chloe needs this dinner to be absolutely flawless to support her husband. Do not mess up the lamb. Do not overseason the greens. And for heaven's sake, try to look presentable if you absolutely must come upstairs to clear the dirty plates. We cannot afford your negative, bitter energy ruining Bradley's big night and embarrassing this family." I looked at the stained apron resting on the counter, then back at the glowing document on my phone. The irony was almost too delicious to process. Bradley was begging for a meeting with the CEO of Apex Luxe, hoping a successful merger would elevate him to vice president. My mother and sister were bending over backward, turning their home into a five-star restaurant just to appease the executives making that decision. And all the while, the woman who held their entire financial future in the palm of her hand was being told to stay in the basement like an unwanted secret. I did not argue with her. I did not raise my voice or defend my worth. Years of emotional abuse and subtle cruelty had taught me that trying to reason with Vivian was a complete waste of breath. She thrived on feeling superior, and she used my very existence as a stepping stone to elevate her own fragile ego. Instead of engaging in a screaming match that she so desperately wanted, I carefully locked my phone screen. The acquisition papers were officially signed. The deal was closed. The trap was fully set, waiting for them to walk right into it. I looked her straight in the eyes, my expression completely unreadable. I let the silence stretch out between us, watching a brief flicker of uncertainty cross her perfectly powdered face. She expected me to pick up the apron. He expected me to nod and retreat to the kitchen pantry like I had done so many times when I was younger and still desperate for her love. But those days were truly over. Before my mother could say another word, the heavy oak front door swung open, bringing a gust of damp Atlanta winter air into the foyer. My younger sister Chloe marched inside, shaking the rain from her expensive-looking but heavily discounted trench coat. Right behind her was Bradley, her perpetually mediocre white husband, who always walked into our childhood home as if he owned the very foundation it was built on. Bradley was already complaining before he even took off his designer shoes. His voice carried that familiar nasal whine of a man who demanded respect he had not earned. "The humidity in here is terrible, Evelyn," he announced, not even bothering to greet my mother properly. "Mr. Sterling is going to notice the smell of cheap pine cleaner immediately. We need this house to smell like luxury, not a public school cafeteria." My mother, who just seconds ago was commanding me like a drill sergeant, instantly softened into a fawning puddle. "Oh, Bradley, sweetie, I will light the imported vanilla candles right now." Chloe tossed her dripping umbrella onto the entryway bench and strutted into the kitchen. Her sleek silk press bounced perfectly around her shoulders, a sharp contrast to my natural, tightly coiled hair. She took one look at me standing near the marble island and immediately wrinkled her perfectly contoured nose. "Oh, great. You are still here." Chloe sighed, dropping her fake Hermes Birkin bag onto the counter next to my phone. "I thought you would be down in the basement prepping the lamb by now." "We really do not have time for your slow pacing today, Naya. Bradley needs everything to be absolutely flawless. And please tell me you are not planning to wear that depressing gray suit tomorrow night. You already look severe enough with your dark skin and that harsh expression. We do not need you scaring off the executives by looking like a grim reaper at a holiday party. Try to find something bright and cheerful. Maybe put on some decent makeup so you do not look so hopelessly single." I remained perfectly still, letting her words hang in the air like toxic perfume. Chloe thrived on bringing me down. She had spent her entire life using my darker complexion and my quiet independence as a punching bag to make herself feel superior. My mother simply stood by, smiling proudly at Chloe, as if insulting her older sister was an impressive talent. "Do not be too hard on her, babe," Bradley chimed in, leaning against the refrigerator with a smug grin. "She just does not understand the kind of pressure we are under. Corporate America is a different beast. She is used to clocking in and clocking out. Not everyone is cut out for the big leagues." "Exactly," Chloe agreed, wrapping her arms around Bradley's neck. "My husband is about to secure the biggest merger of his entire career. Tomorrow night his firm is finalizing their pitch to Apex Lux. Do you know what Apex Lux is?" "Nia, no, of course you do not. You just push papers at whatever little desk job you have. Apex Lux is the largest luxury real estate and hospitality conglomerate in the country, and Bradley is the point man for the entire deal. Once he secures their business, he is being promoted to senior vice president. He will be making more in a month than you make in a decade." I looked at Bradley. His suit was off the rack but tailored to look expensive. His watch was a flashy piece meant to project a wealth he did not actually possess. He stood in my mother's kitchen radiating an unearned arrogance, completely unaware that the very company he was practically salivating over was mine. I built Apex Lux from the ground up, starting with a single neglected beachfront property. I flipped 8 years ago. I navigated the vicious male-dominated corporate real estate world. dealing with men exactly like Bradley every single day. They always underestimated me. They always assumed the quiet, dark-skinned black woman in the boardroom was just an assistant taking notes. Right up until the moment I bought them out and dismantled their companies piece by piece. Bradley was currently staking his entire career, his marriage and his fragile ego on a desperate hope that the anonymous CEO of Apex Lux would grant him an audience. He was preparing to kiss the ring of a phantom billionaire, never realizing that the phantom was standing 3 feet away from him being ordered to scrub his mother-in-law's floor. "You really need to learn your place," Chloe continued, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We are moving into high society now. Nia Bradley is taking this family to the next level. You should be grateful we even let you serve dinner tomorrow night. It is the closest you will ever get to real power. You are just going to be a low-level worker bee forever while we build an empire, so do us all a favor, put on the apron and make yourself useful." I looked down at the stained floral apron resting on the marble counter. Then I looked at Chloe, her eyes shining with malicious joy. I did not raise my hand. I did not shout. I simply smiled, a cold, sharp smile that made Bradley shift uncomfortably on his feet. The sheer magnitude of their delusion was breathtaking. They wanted me to bow down to a man who was unknowingly begging me for his professional survival. They expected me to cater to an illusion of grandeur that I could erase with a single phone call. I slowly picked up my phone, locking the screen that held the absolute power to destroy Bradley's entire department and terminate his career. I let the heavy silence stretch out across the kitchen, savoring the absolute certainty that their carefully constructed world of fake luxury and unearned superiority was about to violently collapse around them. It was almost time to leave. I turned my attention to the floral apron resting on the cold marble island. I did not pick it up as they expected. Instead, I pushed the stained fabric away, sliding it across the smooth surface until it rested directly in front of Chloe. She stared at the crumpled cloth, then up at me, her arched eyebrows drawing together in confusion. Bradley scoffed, crossing his arms as if my refusal was a personal insult. My mother stepped forward, her face flushing with rising anger. "What exactly are you doing, Nia?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I told you to get to work. The guests will be here tomorrow and we are already behind schedule." I picked up my designer handbag, sliding my phone into the interior pocket. The air in the kitchen grew thick with the sudden realization that I was not following the script they had written for my life. I looked at my mother, then at my sister, and finally at the mediocre man they worshipped. I smiled gently, feeling an immense weight lifting from my shoulders. "Merry Christmas," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I am going to Florida." The sheer absurdity of my statement paralyzed them for a fraction of a second. "Florida," Chloe repeated, letting out a disbelieving laugh. "You are not going anywhere. You are staying right here and making sure my husband has a perfect dinner. You are not ruining this for us." I turned my back on them, entirely. Unbothered by her shrill demands, I walked out of the kitchen, my heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floors that I would never scrub again. My mother broke out of her shock and chased after me, her heels thumping against the floorboards. "Nia. Washington, you turn around. Right this instant," she screamed, all traces of her polite church lady persona vanishing. "If you walk out that door, you are no longer a part of this family. I will disown you. You will have absolutely nothing." I reached the foyer and pulled open the hall closet, retrieving my pre-packed silver Rimowa suitcase. I had prepared it the night before. Anticipating this exact confrontation, I gripped the smooth handle, extending it with a satisfying click. The sound snapped Bradley out of his smug silence. "You cannot just leave," he yelled, stepping into the hallway, his face turning red. "My boss is coming tomorrow. This is the most important night of my career. You are acting like a spoiled brat because you are jealous of our success." I opened the heavy oak front door, letting the cool, rainy Atlanta evening wash over my face. A sleek black vehicle was already idling at the curb, the driver stepping out with a large umbrella to shield me from the downpour. I did not look back. I simply walked out, pulling my suitcase away from 32 years of constant belittlement. My mother stood in the doorway, screaming into the rain, telling me I would end up begging on the streets, a worthless failure who would never amount to anything. I stepped into the leather interior of the waiting car. The driver shut the door, closing off her toxic rage. "Please take me to the airport," I told the driver, settling back into the plush seat. The car pulled away, leaving my mother standing on the porch, her face twisted in fury, while Chloe and Bradley hovered uselessly behind her. They had an empty kitchen, a raw crown roast of lamb, and no idea how to prepare a corporate dinner. They were entirely on their own now. 2 hours later, the chaotic energy of my mother's house was a distant memory. I walked through the private security line at the airport, bypassing the crowded terminals. My status granted me immediate access to the luxury departure lounge. I boarded my flight to Florida, settling into a spacious first-class suite that offered complete privacy. The flight attendant brought me a hot towel and a flute filled with vintage champagne. "Thank you," I said, taking a slow sip. The bubbles danced on my tongue, crisp and perfectly dry. I leaned back, watching the rain-streaked window as the plane taxied down the runway. As we ascended, breaking through the dark storm clouds into the clear night sky, I opened my phone and connected to the in-flight internet. I did not check my messages, though. I knew my inbox was likely overflowing with frantic demands and vicious insults from my family. Instead, I opened the Apex Lux internal executive dashboard. I was flying directly to the crown jewel of my hospitality empire. A sprawling 6-star beachfront sanctuary in Florida catering to billionaires and global dignitaries. I was the sole owner of the property, arriving just in time to oversee preparations for our peak holiday season. While I was flying 30,000 feet in the air, my sister and her husband were panicking over a dinner they had no capability of executing. Bradley was probably sweating through his cheap suit, realizing his chances of impressing his corporate superiors were slipping through his fingers. Without me there to silently orchestrate the evening, his entire facade would crumble. His boss would arrive to desperate apologies. I took another sip of champagne, feeling completely and utterly at peace with my life. Altering decision. For years I had absorbed their colorist remarks, their snide comments about my single status, and their absolute worship of a man who brought nothing to the table except the color of his skin. They foolishly mistook my quiet patience for weakness and my intentional privacy for total failure. Now the absolute reckoning had finally arrived for all of them. I closed my eyes, letting the gentle hum of the jet engine lull me into deep relaxation. The heavy burden of playing the invisible daughter was gone forever. I was flying toward my kingdom, leaving them all to hopelessly drown in the shallow, miserable puddles of their own making. Tomorrow morning, the golden sun would rise over the white beaches of my resort, and the true games would finally begin, while I was soaring above the clouds toward my sanctuary. My childhood home in Atlanta was rapidly descending into absolute chaos. The reality of my departure had not truly registered with my mother or my sister when I first stepped into that Uber. They assumed it was a bluff, a temporary rebellion from a daughter they believed had nowhere else to go. Vivian had probably spent the first hour complaining about my supposed attitude, confident that I would come crawling back through the back door with my head bowed, ready to scrub the floors. But as the clock struck 7 and the heavy oak front door chimed to announce the arrival of the first guests, the freezing dread of reality finally set in. Bradley adjusted his cheap tie, putting on his best corporate smile, as he opened the door to welcome Mr. Sterling, his imposing boss, along with 27 other high-level executives and their wives. The guests stepped inside, expecting the warm, inviting scent of a meticulously prepared holiday feast. They expected roasted lamb, fresh herbs, and the rich aroma of fine dining. Instead, they were greeted by the distinct, lingering smell of damp coats and lemon floor cleaner that I had abandoned hours ago. Bradley ushered the executives into the dining room, laughing and offering them seats at the mahogany table. "I will have the catering staff bring out the first course immediately," Bradley announced, puffing out his chest to project an authority he did not possess. He strutted confidently into the kitchen, fully expecting to find me sweating over a hot stove plating gourmet appetizers. Instead, Bradley walked into a kitchen that looked like a crime scene of culinary failure. He stopped dead in his tracks. The massive crown roast of lamb sat exactly where my mother had dumped it earlier, still wrapped in its plastic butcher paper, frozen rock solid on the marble island. The bags of organic vegetables remained untouched and unwashed in the sink. The expensive china plates were still stacked in their cardboard storage boxes, collecting dust. Chloe and Vivian stood near the refrigerator, staring at the raw meat, as if waiting for it to miraculously cook itself. "Where is the food?" Bradley hissed, his face draining of all color. "Where is Nia?" She actually left Chloe panicked, her voice trembling as she clutched her fake designer bag. "She got in a car and left us." "Nothing is cooked, Bradley. Everything is frozen solid. We do not even have bread to serve them." Bradley grabbed the edges of the granite counter, hyperventilating. "This cannot be happening. Mr. Sterling is sitting out there expecting a 5-star meal. He is judging my ability to handle pressure and manage high-stakes environments. If I cannot even host a dinner party, how is he going to trust me to manage the Apex Lux merger?" "Do something, Evelyn. Call a caterer. Call a restaurant." "It is Christmas Eve!" Vivian snapped furiously, tapping away on her phone. "Every luxury catering service is booked solid. Every high-end restaurant is closed." She glared at the frozen lamb, her perfect church lady facade completely crumbling. "Nia did this to sabotage us. She was so incredibly jealous of your success, Bradley. She planned this to humiliate our family." Back in the dining room, the 28 corporate guests sat in awkward silence. Stomachs growled. The promised champagne was nowhere to be seen. Mr. Sterling, a man who wore a Rolex worth more than Bradley's yearly salary, tapped his fingers impatiently against the mahogany table. He glanced toward the kitchen doors, listening to the muffled, frantic arguing echoing down the hallway. Desperate to salvage his sinking career, Bradley finally emerged from the kitchen, holding a plastic tray of stale water crackers and a cheap bottle of grocery store wine he had found pushed to the back of a cabinet. "Please excuse the slight delay," he stammered, offering a cracker to the wife of a senior partner. "We had a minor issue with the kitchen staff." Mr. Sterling looked at the plain, dry cracker and then at Bradley with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. He placed his glass of cheap wine on the table without taking a single sip. "Bradley, you assured me your family was uniquely equipped to handle corporate hospitality," Mr. Sterling said, his voice dangerously low and calm. "This reflects exceptionally poorly on your logistical management skills and your judgment." The humiliation was absolute. Chloe attempted to play the part of the gracious high society hostess, fluttering around the room, apologizing and blaming her sister's supposed mental breakdown for the disaster. But the wealthy elite executives were not interested in her poorly constructed excuses. They were cold, hungry, and deeply insulted. Within 20 minutes, the guests began putting their coats back on, offering polite but icy farewells. Mr. Sterling was the last to leave, pausing at the door to give Bradley a look of profound disappointment. "We will discuss your future at the firm after the holiday, Bradley. Enjoy your evening." As the door clicked shut behind the final guest, the fragile illusion of Bradley's superiority shattered completely. He sank onto the expensive living sofa, burying his face in his hands. Chloe burst into loud tears while Vivian paced the room, screaming curses directed entirely at me. Miles away in Florida, I stepped out of the private elevator and into the penthouse suite of my resort. The air conditioning was perfectly calibrated, and the sound of ocean waves echoed through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. I dropped my suitcase near the door and finally unlocked my phone. The screen immediately lit up with a relentless barrage of notifications. My family had realized I was truly gone, and their panic had rapidly mutated into pure venom. I walked over to the plush white sofa, pouring a glass of sparkling water, while my phone vibrated constantly in my hand, revealing exactly 50 frantic, heavily toxic text messages waiting inside. The first notification was a screenshot sent to the family group chat by Bradley. It was an email from Mr. Sterling, time-stamped just 10 minutes after the executives had walked out of my mother house. I tapped the image, zooming in on the stark corporate text Bradley. The email read, I must express my profound disappointment regarding tonight. We entrust our regional directors with multi-million-dollar accounts because they demonstrate grace under pressure and flawless logistical execution. If you cannot successfully host a holiday dinner for your colleagues, I have serious concerns about your ability to negotiate the upcoming merger with a powerhouse like Apex Lux. I am heavily reconsidering your role as the point person for this acquisition. We will have a formal review of your position on Monday. Beneath the screenshot, Bradley had sent a string of furious texts. Do you see what you did? Nia, you completely ruined my career. Mr. Sterling is threatening to pull me off the biggest deal of the decade. I was supposed to be senior vice president. I was supposed to secure our future. You vindictive, selfish witch. You deliberately sabotaged me because you cannot stand seeing someone else succeed. Then came Chloe, messages flooding the screen in rapid succession. She typed exactly the way she spoke, with frantic, unearned arrogance. You are a monster, Nia. You knew how important this was for my husband. You are just seething with pure jealousy. You have always been jealous of me because I am lighter-skinned, because I am beautiful, because I actually managed to lock down a successful white man who elevates our family. You are so miserable and lonely in your pathetic little life that you had to destroy the one night that was supposed to put us on top. Bradley is crying in the living room. Nia. Crying. Do you have any idea how hard he worked for this? You will never know what it takes to survive in the real corporate world. You just hide behind your cheap desk job. I ignored the text messages and clicked on the voicemail tab. There were 4 audio messages from my mother. I pressed play, placing the phone on the glass coffee table and letting her voice echo through the pristine silence of my penthouse suite. Nia Washington, you listen to me right now, my mother screamed, her voice distorted by rage and desperation. I have spent my entire life trying to polish you, trying to make you presentable to the world. And this is how you repay me. You embarrass me in front of wealthy, important people. You humiliate your sister. God sees your bitter heart. Nia. He sees the ugly, wicked jealousy festering inside you. The Lord does not bless women who turn their backs on their own blood. You are cursed, Nia. The second voicemail was even more unhinged, shifting from religious guilt-tripping to outright psychological warfare. You think you are so smart walking out that door? My mother hissed. But you are nothing without this family. You are a dark-skinned, hard-faced woman with no charm and no husband. Chloe has the right look, the right connections, the elegance that high society demands. She is the light of this family. We let you stand in her glow. We tried to include you so you would not die alone and miserable. You should be down on your knees thanking God that Bradley even allows you in his presence. He brings status to our name. He brings respectability. What do you bring? Nothing but a bad attitude and a heavy spirit. The third voicemail began with the sound of my mother weeping those fake performative tears she used to manipulate the church congregation. I am just so heartbroken, she sobbed, her voice trembling with manufactured grief. I raised you to be a good Christian woman. I taught you to serve others. But you have this darkness in you, Nia. This nasty, vindictive streak. You saw how happy your sister was and you just had to crush it. You want to drag Chloe down to your level because you cannot handle the fact that she won the genetic lottery. You cannot stand that she is fair and beautiful and loved by a powerful man. You are destroying your own soul. Nia, if you do not come back right now and beg Bradley for forgiveness, I will make sure everyone in Atlanta knows exactly what kind of monster you are. I will ruin your name. The final voicemail was short, breathless, and absolutely frantic. Bradley just told me his boss is demanding he fly to Florida to meet the Apex Lux CEO in person to beg for forgiveness, my mother panted. We have to spend thousands of dollars. We do not have to book last-minute flights because of your selfish stunt. You are going to pay us back every single penny. Nia, you hear me? You are going to drain your pathetic little savings account and reimburse us for this trip. You owe us your life. I sat perfectly still on the white sofa, staring out at the dark ocean waves crashing against the pristine Florida beach. The venom spilling from my phone was meant to break me down, to shatter my confidence and send me crawling back to them, begging for scraps of their toxic affection. For 32 years, they had used those exact words to keep me small. They weaponized religion. They weaponized my skin tone. They weaponized my single status, all to ensure I remained their obedient shadow. But hearing those words now while sitting in a multi-million-dollar penthouse that I owned entirely free and clear felt incredibly hollow. They were screaming into a void. They thought they were punishing a helpless maid. They had no idea they had just declared war on a mogul. I smiled to myself, taking a slow, deep breath as the cool air conditioning washed over my skin. I picked up my phone one last time, looking at the endless stream of notifications polluting my screen. For decades, I had absorbed their vitriol in silence, swallowing my pride to keep a fragile peace that never truly existed. They expected a groveling apology. They expected me to break down in tears and beg for their conditional forgiveness. Instead, I opened the family group chat where Bradley, Chloe, and my mother were still firing off rapid demands and insults. I tapped the text box, my fingers moving with calm, deliberate precision. I typed 8 simple words. I am not your maid order takeout. I pressed send, watching the message bubble pop onto the screen. A profound sense of liberation washed over me as I went into my contact settings. I tapped my mother name, scrolling to the bottom of her profile, and pressed block. I did the same for Chloe, watching her contact card disappear into the digital void. Finally, I blocked Bradley, severing the last remaining cord, tying me to that miserable house in Atlanta. I tossed the phone onto the plush white sofa and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. The dark Florida ocean stretched out before me, vast and untamed. I was completely untouchable now. Back in Atlanta, the situation had escalated from a ruined dinner party into a full-blown corporate catastrophe. Bradley was pacing the living room floor, his cheap suit jacket discarded on an armchair, his tie loosened around his neck. His phone vibrated violently against the coffee table. He snatched it up, hoping for an apology from me, but instead found a second highly urgent email from Mr. Sterling. The subject line contained no words, just a high-priority red exclamation mark. Bradley opened the message, his hands shaking visibly. Mr. Sterling was not a man who handed out second chances lightly. The email was brutally concise. Bradley, the message read, "Your performance tonight was an absolute embarrassment to this firm. However, the Apex Lux acquisition is too critical to abandon because of your domestic failures. I have just learned that the anonymous CEO of Apex Lux is currently in residence at their flagship property in Florida. You are to book the next flight out of Atlanta. You will arrive at that resort and secure a 10-minute meeting with the CEO to salvage this deal. You will beg for their time if you must. If you return to Atlanta without a signed agreement, do not bother coming back to this office. Your employment will be terminated immediately." Bradley dropped his phone, his face draining of all color. He was hyperventilating, staring at the crushing reality that his entire career hung by a fragile thread. He turned to Chloe and my mother, who were still sitting on the couch, complaining bitterly about my text message. "I have to go to Florida tonight," Bradley gasped, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Mr. Sterling gave me an ultimatum. I have to fly to the Apex Lux flagship resort and beg their CEO for a meeting, or I am fired." "Florida," Chloe repeated, her eyes suddenly lighting up as she ignored the part about her husband losing his job. "The Apex Lux flagship resort is a 6-star property. It is one of the most exclusive luxury destinations in the world. Celebrities stay there. Bradley, this is perfect. We need a vacation after the horrible trauma Nia just put us through. I am coming with you." Vivian immediately stood up, smoothing her designer knit suit. "Absolutely not," she declared. "You are not leaving me in this empty house with a frozen lamb. I need to recover from the severe emotional distress my ungrateful daughter caused me. Besides, the ladies at the church will be green with envy when they see photos of us lounging at a 6-star resort. We are making this a family trip." Bradley stared at them in absolute horror. "Evelyn, Chloe, we cannot afford that." He pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. I am on the verge of losing my job. This is not a vacation, it is a rescue mission. I have to beg a billionaire for my professional life. The resort costs thousands of dollars a night. I do not have that kind of money on my credit cards. Chloe crossed her arms, pouting her lips in that manipulative way she knew always worked on him. Bradley, you promised me a luxury lifestyle, she whined. You promised you were taking this family to the next level. If you cannot even bring your wife to Florida to support you during a stressful business trip, what kind of provider are you? Vivian chimed in, nodding in agreement. Do not be cheap, Bradley. You have to spend money to make money. If you walk into that resort looking like a desperate poor man, the CEO will never respect you. You need your beautiful, elegant wife by your side to project status and wealth. Put the flights and the rooms on your corporate card. You can pay it off after you secure the promotion. Bradley looked between the two women, utterly defeated by their relentless demands. He knew he was already drowning in debt. He knew his corporate card was nearly maxed out from the disastrous dinner party expenses. But he was too weak and too terrified of losing his golden child wife to say no. Defeated, he pulled out his laptop and began searching for the cheapest coach flights to Florida, maxing out his last available credit line to book 3 tickets. Chloe immediately pulled out her phone, snapping a selfie with her designer luggage, captioning it, "Emergency luxury getaway, with hubby off to secure the bag with Apex Lux." They were treating his highly stressful professional execution like a fun, all-expenses-paid photo op, completely oblivious to the cold, hard, inescapable fact that they were soon flying directly into my absolute undisputed kingdom, waiting patiently to finally destroy them both tonight. The harsh morning sun beat down on the damp pavement outside the Miami International Airport as Bradley, Chloe, and Vivian climbed out of a standard rideshare sedan looking thoroughly rumpled after a sleepless night and a cramped coach flight squeezed into middle seats. But the moment the imposing wrought iron gates of the Apex Lux flagship resort loomed into view, their deep exhaustion evaporated instantly, replaced by a toxic cocktail of unearned entitlement and desperate greed. The sprawling property was a breathtaking monument to modern wealth, intentionally designed to intimidate and awe. Soaring walls of imported white Italian marble gleamed against the vibrant turquoise backdrop of the Atlantic Ocean. Cascading infinity waterfalls flanked the grand entrance, surrounded by rare black orchids and towering royal palms. The air itself smelled like crushed fig and white tea, a signature botanical scent pumped through the outdoor ventilation systems to signal absolute, untouchable luxury. Fleet of valets in crisp white linen suits moved silently around the wide circular driveway, seamlessly opening doors for actual billionaires stepping out of custom Rolls-Royces and sleek Maybachs. Chloe immediately straightened her posture, gripping her heavily discounted fake designer bag, tightly, desperately trying to project an aura of high society belonging. Vivian adjusted her knit jacket, adopting her most haughty church lady expression, preparing to treat the hospitality staff with the exact same disdain she usually reserved for me. They pushed past a valet attempting to offer them chilled eucalyptus towels. "Do not touch my luggage," Vivian snapped at the young bellboy, her voice dripping with artificial superiority. "We are here on highly important corporate business. Bring us 3 glasses of vintage champagne immediately." The bellboy maintained his flawless 6-star hospitality training, offering a polite nod before smoothly directing them to the main reception desk. The lobby was a cathedral of glass and gold, featuring a massive 3-story crystal chandelier that caught the morning ocean light. While Vivian and Chloe posed for endless selfies in front of a sprawling floral arrangement, trying to manufacture an illusion of generational wealth for their social media followers. Bradley stood at the front desk, sweating profusely. The sleek, minimalist marble counter offered no place for him to hide his mounting financial panic. "Sir," the front desk agent murmured politely, her perfectly manicured fingers hovering over the glowing keyboard. "We require a deposit hold of $4,000 per night for the standard Ocean View suite." Bradley swallowed hard, his Adam apple bobbing nervously as he realized the incidental hold alone would completely drain his final resources. He slid his corporate credit card across the cool marble, silently praying to whatever God would listen that the transaction would not be declined. He knew he had exactly $12,000 left on his limit after covering the catastrophic dinner party and the last-minute flights. The agonizing seconds stretched out as the machine processed the payment. When the approved notification finally beeped, Bradley let out a shaky breath, completely ignoring the terrifying reality that he was now operating on the absolute edge of total financial ruin. He had bet his entire livelihood on the desperate hope that he could charm the anonymous CEO and secure a promotion he did not deserve. Chloe marched up to the desk, shoving her husband aside. A standard suite, she sneered, her voice echoing loudly across the serene, tranquil lobby. That is absolutely unacceptable. My husband is the regional director of a major real estate firm. He is here to secure a multi-million-dollar merger with your CEO today. We require an immediate upgrade to the top-floor penthouse and complimentary access to the VIP beach club. We are representing high-level business interests, and I will not be shoved into some basic room like a common tourist. The agent smiled a tight professional smile that conveyed absolute boundaries. I apologize for the inconvenience, madam, but our penthouse suites are strictly reserved for executive ownership, and the VIP cabanas require elite-tier membership. We cannot accommodate free upgrades. Do you know who we are? Vivian interjected, slamming her manicured hand on the counter, just as she had done in my kitchen the night before. We are a family of high standing. You will fetch your manager right now and give us the respect this family deserves. We do not associate with the lower classes, and we certainly do not accept basic accommodations when my son-in-law is about to buy your entire company. While Bradley frantically tried to quiet his mother-in-law, terrified of causing a public scene before his crucial make-or-break meeting, Vivian turned away in a dramatic huff. She crossed her arms and glared through the massive floor-to-ceiling glass walls that overlooked the resort. Private infinity pool. Beyond the sparkling water lay a secluded, roped-off section of the pristine white sand beach, heavily guarded by two muscular men in dark tailored suits. It was the ultra-exclusive VIP cabana area, a pristine sanctuary reserved only for the absolute highest echelon of global wealth. Vivian squinted against the bright morning glare, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the central luxury cabana. A woman was lounging comfortably on a plush white daybed dressed in a flawless emerald green silk resort suit that radiated quiet, intimidating power. A silver bucket of expensive champagne sat on the teak table next to her. A distinguished-looking man in a sharp linen blazer, who happened to be the resort operations director, was standing respectfully beside her, leaning in to pour her a cup of freshly brewed tea while she reviewed a leather-bound portfolio. Vivian stepped closer to the glass, her breath fogging the pristine pane. Her heart stopped completely as the woman turned her head slightly to laugh at something the director said. The woman casually sipping tea in the most exclusive restricted section of the billionaire resort was not a wealthy celebrity. It was her dark-skinned, unmarried, deeply despised eldest daughter, Nia Washington. It was me sitting precisely where I belonged. Vivian slapped her palm against the thick glass, her manicured nails clicking sharply as a gasp escaped her throat. She grabbed Chloe by the arm, digging her fingers into her sister's trench coat. "Look!" Vivian hissed, pointing a trembling finger toward the pristine white sands. "That is your sister. That is Nia." Chloe dropped her fake designer bag on the polished marble floor, completely forgetting about Bradley sweating at the reception desk. She marched up to the glass, her eyes widening in absolute disbelief as she stared at me, lounging in the restricted VIP cabana. The sheer audacity of my presence in a space she was just explicitly denied access to sent a shockwave of pure rage through her entire body. I watched them from my daybed, catching the frantic movement behind the lobby glass, out of the corner of my eye. I smiled, taking a slow sip of my perfectly brewed herbal tea. I turned to the resort operations director, handing him the leather-bound portfolio. Thank you, Marcus, I said, my voice smooth and relaxed. The quarterly projections look phenomenal. I will head inside now to prepare for my upcoming meeting. Marcus bowed respectfully, taking the portfolio. Please let me know if you require anything else. Miss Washington. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles from my emerald green silk suit, picking up my teacup and walking leisurely toward the sliding glass doors that separated my private sanctuary from the main lobby. The moment the automatic doors parted, opening into the cool, air-conditioned cathedral of the reception area, Chloe launched her attack. She stomped across the lobby floor, her discounted heels echoing loudly, disrupting the serene atmosphere. "You absolute psycho!" Chloe shrieked, her voice vibrating with hysterical anger. "I cannot believe you actually followed us here. You are stalking us. You are obsessed with my husband and drained your savings account just to book a fake cabana to ruin his trip." Guests in the lobby paused, turning their heads to witness the spectacle. A wealthy couple checking in nearby exchanged uncomfortable glances. Two security guards immediately stepped forward, preparing to remove the screaming woman. I caught the eye of the lead guard and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of my head. He halted instantly, crossing his arms and waiting for my command. I wanted to let them dig their own graves right here in the center of my palace. I took a delicate sip of my tea, letting the warm liquid soothe my throat, before I even bothered to acknowledge her frantic shouting. "You think I followed you, Chloe?" I asked, my tone conversational and completely unbothered. "You truly believe that my entire existence revolves around a mediocre regional director who cannot even afford a premium room without begging his mother-in-law to throw a tantrum at the front desk?" Vivian marched over, joining the fray with her usual brand of aggressive superiority. Her face was flushed red with indignation matching the tacky shade of her lipstick. "Nia Washington, you will lower your voice and show some respect," Vivian commanded, completely ignoring the fact that I had not raised my voice a single decibel. "You are a disgrace to this family. I know exactly what you are doing. You booked the cheapest room you could find and snuck into that VIP area just to take photos and make yourself look important. You are trying to embarrass Bradley in front of his boss. I will not allow your bitter jealousy to destroy his promotion. Get your cheap bags and leave this property this instant before Mr. Sterling arrives and sees you loitering in the lobby like a common beggar." I looked my mother up and down, taking in her wrinkled knit suit and the exhausted, frantic energy radiating from her pores. Then I looked at Chloe, who was practically vibrating with unearned arrogance. I did not frown, I did not cry. I simply smiled, radiating a quiet, terrifying authority that neither of them possessed the emotional intelligence to understand. "You are standing in a 6-star resort screaming like vendors at a flea market," I said, my voice dripping with icy precision. "Do you realize how utterly ridiculous you look right now? You walked in here demanding penthouses. You cannot afford acting like you own the world while your husband sweats bullets at the reception desk, praying his corporate card does not decline the incidental hold. And yet you have the audacity to call me a beggar. How dare you speak to us like that?" Chloe yelled, stepping closer, thrusting her finger toward my face. "You are nothing but a jealous spinster. You have no man, no status, and no future. Bradley is about to become a senior vice president. He is meeting with the CEO of Apex Lux today. You are just a pathetic worker bee trying to sabotage the only successful people in this family. Security." Chloe spun around, waving her arms at the guards standing nearby. "Security, remove this woman. She is harassing us. She is stalking my husband." The guards did not move an inch. They stared blankly at Chloe, their faces completely impassive, waiting only for my signal. I took another slow sip of my tea, savoring the absolute absurdity of her demand. The silence in the lobby grew heavy, pressing down on Chloe and Vivian as they realized their commands were being entirely ignored by the staff. I lowered my teacup, meeting Chloe's furious gaze with eyes as cold as the ocean floor. "You cannot afford to throw me out, Chloe," I said smoothly. "You cannot afford the air you are breathing right now in this lobby. You came to Florida to secure a bag you have not earned playing corporate dress-up. You think you hold power here? But true power does not scream in hotel lobbies. True power never begs for room upgrades like a frightened imposter who has absolutely no idea how this corporate world actually operates. Chloe's mouth opened and closed silently, resembling a fish pulled fresh from the water. She looked wildly around the sprawling, magnificent lobby, searching for validation from the wealthy onlookers. But they had all returned to their own hushed conversations, entirely disinterested in her frantic display. The security guards remained rooted to their posts, their hands clasped professionally behind their backs, watching the spectacle with trained indifference. Vivian, however, was not ready to surrender her false crown. She marched forward, her sensible orthopedic heels stomping against the imported Italian marble. "You listen to me, you ungrateful child," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper meant only for my ears. "You think you can stand there in a borrowed suit and lecture us about power. You are a dark-skinned spinster who spends her holidays alone. Bradley is a legitimate executive. Chloe is building a high-society luxury lifestyle. You are just a bitter, miserable woman trying to tear down her own sister because you know you will never have what she has." I let out a soft, genuine laugh. I turned away from them, walked over to a plush emerald velvet lounge chair, positioned in the center of the grand lobby, and slowly sat down. Crossing my legs with deliberate elegance, I rested my teacup on the gold-accented side table and looked up at the two women looming over me. Their entire existence was built on a fragile, crumbling foundation of maxed-out credit cards and performative church lady arrogance. A luxury lifestyle. "Chloe," I asked, my voice echoing with icy amusement, "let us talk about your magnificent luxury lifestyle. Let us talk about that hideous bag you are clutching like a life preserver." Chloe defensively pulled the faux Hermès Birkin tighter against her chest, her knuckles turning white. "This bag is worth more than your entire life savings." "Nia," she sneered, her confidence returning slightly at the mere mention of her favorite status symbol. "Bradley bought it for my anniversary. It is an exclusive piece that you could never even dream of touching." "It is a remarkably cheap counterfeit," I corrected smoothly, "and Bradley did not buy it for you. You bought it yourself on a hidden platinum credit card that you maxed out exactly 3 months ago. You owe exactly $15,420 on that card, Chloe. The interest rate is currently sitting at 24%, and you have missed the last 2 minimum payments. You have been dodging calls from the collection agency since Thanksgiving." The color completely drained from Chloe's face, leaving her looking gray and sickly under the crystal chandeliers. She took a sudden step back, as if I had physically struck her. Her eyes darted toward Bradley, who was still frantically arguing with the front desk agent, completely oblivious to our conversation. How she stammered her voice, barely a terrified whisper. "How could you possibly know that?" I ignored her, turning my sharp gaze directly to my mother, who was watching me with a sudden mounting terror in her eyes. "And you, Mother," I continued, my tone devoid of any empathy or hesitation. "You are playing the grand matriarch, lecturing me about family values and high society, while you secretly drain Dad's retirement fund to cover your golden child financial disasters. You withdrew $10,000 last Tuesday, just to keep Chloe creditors from calling the house and ruining your precious, spotless church reputation. You lied to Dad and told him it was for a necessary roof repair. Who is really draining their savings here? Who is the actual beggar in this family?" Vivian staggered backward, her hand flying to her chest, clutching her heavy diamond cross pendant, as if the jewelry could magically shield her from the brutal, crushing truth. She looked as though the ground beneath the polished marble floor had suddenly given way. Her mouth trembled, but the vicious insults she usually kept so readily available were entirely gone. The illusion she had spent decades meticulously crafting was evaporating right in front of her eyes in the most public space possible. "You are lying," Vivian gasped, though the sheer unadulterated panic in her eyes confirmed every single word I said. "You are making this up. You have no way of knowing our private banking details. You are a demonic liar." "Nia, you underestimate me, Mother," I replied, leaning back against the velvet cushions, completely unbothered by her religious guilt-tripping. "You have always underestimated me. You thought because I remained quiet, I was ignorant. You thought because I did not flaunt designer labels, I was impoverished. You failed to realize that while you were busy gossiping at Sunday service, and Chloe was busy playing pretend on social media, I was building a network of information and resources that you cannot even begin to comprehend. I know exactly how much debt Bradley is carrying. I know exactly how close your house is to foreclosure, and I know exactly how desperate you all are right now. Chloe looked down at her fake Birkin bag, suddenly treating the synthetic leather like a toxic object. Her entire identity was wrapped up in projecting an image of white-collar success and racial elevation. To have her deepest, darkest financial shame laid bare in the middle of a six-star resort lobby by the sister she constantly belittled was a psychological destruction she was completely unequipped to handle. "Please keep your voice down," Chloe whispered, tears of genuine humiliation welling in her eyes. "If Bradley hears you, he will kill me. He does not know about the debt. He thinks the bag is real. He thinks we are financially secure." The irony was spectacular. Bradley, the mediocre regional director demanding respect from billionaires, was drowning in debt caused by the very woman he thought elevated his status. They were a perfectly matched pair of desperate frauds feeding off each other. Delusions. I picked up my teacup and took another slow, relaxing sip. "I have absolutely no intention of telling Bradley anything." "Chloe," I said dismissively, "I do not care enough about his fragile ego or your crumbling marriage to intervene. I simply want you both to understand exactly where you stand. You are operating on borrowed time and stolen money. You hold no power over me, you never did, ever." Vivian stared at me, her chest heaving as she struggled to process the total inversion of our family dynamic. The dark-skinned daughter she had treated like a servant was sitting in the center of an ultra-exclusive sanctuary, wielding their darkest secrets like a seasoned corporate assassin. She tried to summon her righteous anger, but it collapsed under the weight of her undeniable exposure. "You are a cold, heartless woman, Nia," Vivian choked out, her voice laced with absolute defeat. "You sit there acting like some kind of boss while your family is struggling to survive." I set the teacup down with a sharp, definitive clink against the saucer. "I am a boss, Mother," I stated, my voice resonating with absolute finality. "And you are no longer my family. You are simply uninvited guests, standing in my lobby, making a scene. Now I suggest you go collect your sweating, panicked son-in-law before he completely embarrasses himself at the reception desk. He has a very important meeting to prepare for today, and you would not want to ruin his only chance at serving his corporate masters." I remained seated in the plush velvet chair, utterly unbothered, while Chloe and Vivian stood paralyzed in the pristine air-conditioned space. They had no retorts left, no religious guilt trips to deploy, and no fake luxury to hide behind. The silence stretched between us, heavy and absolute, marking the exact moment they finally realized they had walked blindly into a slaughterhouse. The heavy silence shattered by the frantic slapping of leather shoes against marble. Bradley had finally abandoned his desperate negotiations at the reception desk. His face was slick with sweat and his tie hung haphazardly around his neck, but he forcibly straightened his posture, marching toward us. He had noticed the standoff from across the vast lobby and decided this was the perfect moment to assert his perceived authority. He shoved past a bellboy and positioned himself squarely between me and his wife. "What is the meaning of this?" Bradley demanded, his voice booming with the unearned confidence of a man who believed the world existed solely to cater to him. He glared down at me in my velvet chair. "Are you stalking us, Nia? You cause a disaster at our home and now follow my family to Florida to harass us." Chloe immediately seized the opportunity to hide behind her husband. She grabbed his arm, burying her face in his shoulder, acting like a fragile victim who had just been brutally attacked. "Bradley, she is completely unhinged," Chloe whimpered, her arrogant tone replaced by theatrical fragility. "She is making up horrible lies about us. We wanted a peaceful morning before your crucial meeting and she attacks my mother." Bradley puffed out his chest, his face contorting into a mask of righteous indignation. He looked around the lobby, noticing the security guards standing perfectly still. "You there!" Bradley barked, snapping his fingers at the nearest guard. "I need the general manager right this second. This woman is harassing my wife. I am a high-level corporate executive conducting multi-million-dollar business, and I demand she be removed immediately." The lead security guard did not blink. He simply maintained his position, refusing to acknowledge Bradley. However, the commotion had successfully drawn the attention of Marcus, the resort operations director, who had been overseeing the VIP cabanas. Marcus stepped forward, moving with the polished, effortless grace required of executive management. He bypassed Bradley entirely and stopped a respectful distance away. "Is there a problem here?" Marcus asked, his tone perfectly neutral. "Yes, there is a massive problem," Bradley shouted, stepping into Marcus' personal space to exert dominance. "My name is Bradley, and I am the regional director for a top-tier commercial real estate firm. I am here to meet with the CEO of Apex Lux today. This woman sitting in your lounge chair is my unstable sister-in-law. She followed us from Atlanta to sabotage my negotiations. I want her escorted off this property right now, or your CEO hears about your abysmal security." Marcus did not flinch at the threat. His expression remained entirely impassive as he looked at Bradley. Then slowly and deliberately, Marcus shifted his gaze away from the red-faced, screaming man and looked directly at me. The air in the lobby seemed to freeze. Bradley, Chloe, and Vivian were entirely too consumed by their frantic drama to notice the profound shift in power. They did not see the operations director of a 6-star luxury resort silently deferring to the dark-skinned woman they treated like a peasant. Marcus locked eyes with me. He was waiting for my absolute command. One gesture from me and Bradley would be dragged out by his collar, thrown onto the sweltering pavement, and banned from every Apex Lux property globally. I held Marcus' gaze. I thought about ending it right there. I thought about having them tossed into the street like common trash. But that would be too quick. That would spare Bradley the ultimate humiliation of the boardroom. I wanted him to walk into that penthouse suite. I wanted to watch his soul leave his body. I offered Marcus a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. Let them stay. Let them play out their miserable little charade to the very bitter end. Marcus understood immediately. He turned his attention back to Bradley, smoothing his tailored blazer. "Sir, we do not forcefully eject guests without conducting a thorough security review," Marcus stated, his voice placating. "However, to ensure your peace of mind and allow you to prepare for your important meeting without distractions, I will personally authorize your party to utilize the executive waiting lounge on the top floor. It is highly secure and strictly reserved for our elite corporate clients. Your family may wait there until your scheduled appointment with the CEO." Bradley's chest swelled to twice its normal size. He genuinely believed his aggressive posturing and mediocre corporate title had just intimidated the management of a global luxury resort into submission. He shot me a look of triumphant venom, convinced he had just won a massive victory. "Do you see that?" Nia Bradley sneered, adjusting his tie with trembling fingers. "That is how real power works in the corporate world. You cannot just sneak into luxury spaces and pretend you belong. They know who the real executives are. Now take your cheap suitcase and crawl back to your budget motel." Chloe lifted her head from Bradley's shoulder, a smug, victorious smile returning to her lips. She clung to his arm, practically vibrating with renewed arrogance. "Thank you, baby," Chloe cooed loudly, ensuring everyone in the vicinity could hear her. "You always know exactly how to handle the help." Vivian quickly adjusted her heavy diamond cross pendant, trying to regain her church lady composure. She glared at me, her eyes burning with residual panic, but she forced a haughty laugh. "You see," Vivian mocked, her voice dripping with artificial pity. "God always protects the righteous. Bradley is a true leader. You tried to bring your bitter energy into our lives and failed." I remained seated in my velvet chair, entirely motionless. I did not offer a single word of rebuttal. I simply watched them turn their backs on me. Bradley led his wife and mother-in-law toward the gold-plated elevators reserved strictly for corporate guests, strutting across the marble floor like a conquering king. Chloe and Vivian followed, completely intoxicated by their false elite status. They had reached the elevator banks when Vivian suddenly stopped. She patted her pockets with feigned panic, telling Bradley and Chloe to go ahead to the executive lounge without her because she had dropped her phone. Bradley nodded and ushered his wife into the waiting car. The gold doors slid shut, leaving my mother alone. She spun around, her eyes locking onto me with the predatory focus of a desperate woman. She marched back across the sprawling lobby, her heels striking the stone with aggressive, rhythmic thuds. I watched her approach from my chair, my posture relaxed. Vivian did not shout this time. She knew better than to draw the attention of the security guards. Instead, she leaned down, her face inches from mine, and grabbed my forearm. "Get up!" she hissed, her breath smelling of stale coffee. "We are going to have a private conversation right now." I could have called security, but a calculating instinct told me to let her speak. I wanted her to empty every drop of venom from her soul. I stood up, gracefully, and allowed her to guide me into a secluded, dimly lit alcove, tucked behind a massive indoor waterfall feature. The heavy sound of rushing water masked our voices entirely, creating a perfect, isolated vacuum away from the prying eyes of the guests. The moment we were out of sight, the fake church lady persona shattered completely, revealing the ugly, bitter reality underneath. Vivian backed me against the wall, her eyes flashing with pure hatred. "You think you are so clever, Nia." She spat, her voice trembling with rage. "You think because you saved a few paychecks that you suddenly hold power over this family. Let me make something crystal clear. You are nothing. You have always been nothing." I stared at her, my face a perfect, unreadable mask. My silence only infuriated her more, driving her to dig into the deepest insecurities she had planted in me since childhood. "Look at you," Vivian sneered, gesturing up and down my body with absolute disgust. "You are a dark-skinned, hard-faced woman with absolutely no charm. You have no husband. You have no children. You spend your holidays entirely alone because you are fundamentally unlovable. Do you have any idea how exhausting it was to raise you? Every time I looked at you, I saw a heavy, bitter burden." Then Chloe came along. Chloe is bright, fair, beautiful, and knows how to operate in a world that you could never understand. My mother took a step closer, jabbing her finger into my shoulder. "Bradley is the best thing that ever happened to this family. He is a successful white man who chose your sister. He elevated our status. He gave Chloe the high society life she deserves. And instead of falling to your knees and thanking God that he allows you to sit at our dinner table, you try to humiliate him just because you are consumed by your own pathetic, ugly jealousy." Vivian was breathing heavily, fueled by her own toxic delusions. The religious hypocrisy poured out of her, twisted to fit her desperate narrative. "The Lord punishes wicked women like you. Nia, you are trying to destroy a holy marriage because you cannot secure one for yourself. Well, I will not allow it. I am the matriarch of this family, and I am laying down the law right now." She grabbed my silk lapel, her knuckles white with tension. "You are going to walk out of this resort today. You are going to go back to the airport, book the cheapest flight back to Atlanta, and you are going to disappear. You will not show your face in this state again until Bradley secures his promotion. He needs this merger with Apex Lux. Chloe needs this promotion to maintain her lifestyle. If you do anything to jeopardize his meeting today, if you even breathe in his direction, I swear I will destroy you. I will go to your employer. I will tell everyone that you are mentally unstable and that you are a danger to society. We'll make sure you lose whatever pathetic job you have managed to scrape together. You are going to pack your bags and leave Florida immediately. Nia." That is not a request. It is a command. I stood listening to the rushing water, letting every horrific word wash over me. Once this would have broken me, it would have sent me to my room in tears, desperate to earn her love. But today, standing in my luxury empire, I felt cold, clinical detachment. I did not argue back or shed a tear. I simply looked at the woman who had birthed me, observing her the way a scientist observes a particularly toxic insect. I took in the frantic twitch of her eye, the clenching of her jaw, and the absolute certainty in her mind that she had just won. She believed her cruel words had broken my spirit. She believed she had successfully protected her golden child and her mediocre son-in-law. I let her have that illusion. I let her marinate in her false sense of absolute victory. "Okay, Mother," I said, my voice smooth, quiet, and completely devoid of emotion. "I understand exactly what you are saying." Vivian let go of my jacket, a smug, satisfied smile spreading across her face. "Good," she huffed, smoothing her own wrinkled suit. "See that you remember your place." Vivian turned on her heel and marched out of the alcove, heading toward the elevators to join Bradley and Chloe in the executive lounge. She thought she had just secured her family wealthy future. She had no idea she had just handed me the final devastating piece of ammunition I needed to execute their total and absolute destruction. I remained in the shadows for a moment longer, perfectly still, perfectly calm, as the trap finally snapped shut. I was ready to end them all. As the sharp clicking of my mother's sensible orthopedic heels faded into the ambient noise of the rushing indoor waterfall, I slowly reached into the deep pocket of my emerald green silk trousers. I wrapped my fingers around the cool metal edge of my smartphone. I pulled it out and looked at the screen, which was still brightly illuminated. The voice memo application displayed a pulsing red line, capturing the ambient sound of the water. The timer indicated that it had been recording for exactly 7 minutes and 42 seconds. I calmly pressed the stop button. A prompt appeared asking me to name the file. I typed the word confession, hit save, and immediately uploaded the audio file to my secure private cloud server. I wanted to ensure that no matter what happened next, that venomous monologue would never be lost or deleted. My mother thought she had cornered me in a blind spot, completely unaware that her arrogance had just provided me with the ultimate weapon to guarantee her destruction. For years she had gaslighted me, twisting her cruelty into maternal tough love, shifting the narrative so she always emerged as the righteous victim. But audio does not lie. Audio does not forget. And this particular audio file contained enough unfiltered racism, emotional abuse, and toxic manipulation to permanently shatter her fragile reputation in her beloved church community. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, feeling the tangible weight of that digital file resting against my hip like a loaded gun. The trap was locked. I stepped out of the dimly lit alcove and back into the sprawling, sunlit lobby of my resort. The air felt crisper, now cleaner. I rolled my shoulders back, letting the last residual traces of the obedient, invisible daughter fall away completely. I was no longer Nia Washington, the dark-skinned disappointment of the family. I was the absolute authority in this building, and it was time to dress the part. I bypassed the main reception desk and walked purposefully toward a discreet, unmarked set of brushed steel elevator doors tucked behind a wall of black orchids. I swiped my master keycard, and the doors glided open silently, welcoming me into the private car reserved exclusively for the owner. As the elevator shot upward toward the penthouse suite, I watched the breathtaking view of the Atlantic Ocean expand through the glass back wall. The sheer scale of my empire stretched out beneath me, a physical manifestation of the relentless drive I had used to survive their abuse. I stepped into my penthouse and moved directly to the master dressing room. It was time to shed the resort wear and put on my armor. I selected a bespoke razor, sharp ivory power suit crafted by a Milanese tailor. The cut was immaculate, designed to project unyielding authority and sophisticated dominance. I paired it with a deep crimson silk blouse and a pair of classic black stiletto pumps that clicked against the marble floors like gavels striking a judge block. I pulled my hair back into a sleek, flawless updo, applying a bold crimson lipstick that my mother would have undoubtedly deemed too harsh. I looked at myself in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. There was no trace of the battered scapegoat. I looked exactly like what I was. A ruthless, brilliant corporate titan, preparing for an execution. I grabbed my leather portfolio, checked my watch, and headed for the private corridor connecting my penthouse directly to the executive boardroom. Meanwhile, several floors below, a very different kind of procession was taking place. Bradley, Chloe, and my mother were waiting in the designated VIP corporate lounge when Mr. Sterling finally arrived. The senior executive walked into the room, radiating an aura of severe impatience and high-stakes pressure. Mr. Sterling was a man who did not tolerate failure, and his icy glare immediately caused Bradley to break out in a fresh layer of nervous sweat. Bradley jumped to his feet, practically bowing as he introduced his wife and mother-in-law. Mr. Sterling offered a curt dismissive nod, clearly unamused by the fact that Bradley had turned a critical damage control mission into a family vacation. Chloe tried to flash her most charming high society smile, clutching her fake Hermes bag. But Mr. Sterling completely ignored her, turning his attention to the sleek, silent concierge who had arrived to escort them. The concierge, a woman highly trained to handle global dignitaries, gestured gracefully toward the gold-plated executive elevators. "Right this way, gentlemen," she announced, her voice a perfect murmur of professional hospitality. "The CEO is ready to receive you in the top-floor boardroom." Bradley swallowed hard, his face pale as he stepped into the elevator. Mr. Sterling followed, standing rigidly with his arms crossed. To Mr. Sterling's profound annoyance, Chloe and Vivian quickly slipped into the elevator car, right behind them. Vivian adjusted her heavy diamond cross, while Chloe whispered excitedly to Bradley about how amazing the top-floor views must be. They rode the elevator upward in a suffocatingly tense silence. Bradley wiped his sweaty palms against his cheap suit trousers silently, rehearsing his desperate apologies and his flawed business pitch. He was entirely focused on begging the mysterious Apex Lux billionaire for a second chance, completely oblivious to the fact that he was hurtling directly toward a massacre. The gold doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the ultra-modern glass-walled reception area of the executive floor. The space was breathtaking, featuring panoramic views of the ocean and minimalist expensive art. Chloe and Vivian gasped audibly, their eyes wide with greed as they took in the sheer magnitude of the wealth surrounding them. They strutted out of the elevator acting as though they had already conquered the building completely, unaware that every step they took brought them closer to the very woman they had just attempted to banish from the property. The stage was flawlessly set, and the actors had taken their places. The concierge directed Bradley and Mr. Sterling through a set of imposing double doors into the primary boardroom. The space was a masterpiece of corporate intimidation. A massive slab of polished black obsidian served as the conference table, surrounded by 12 ergonomic leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a dizzying panoramic view of the coastline, making anyone inside feel suspended above the world. Bradley took a seat near the center, his hands trembling slightly as he placed his heavily padded leather briefcase onto the dark stone surface. Mr. Sterling sat next to him, radiating an intense coiled energy. Outside those thick, soundproof glass walls, the atmosphere was drastically different. Chloe and Vivian had been instructed to wait in the ultra-luxury reception area. It was a serene space designed to calm the nerves of visiting billionaires, featuring a cascading water wall and abstract sculptures. However, Chloe and Vivian treated the quiet, sophisticated waiting room like their own personal nightclub. Chloe immediately kicked off her heels and draped her legs over a pristine white velvet sofa. She held her phone high in the air, snapping endless selfies with her lips pursed in an exaggerated pout. Vivian paced the room, touching the expensive artwork and loudly complaining about the lack of complimentary champagne. They ignored the severe glances cast by passing executive staff. Their loud, cackling laughter echoed obnoxiously against the polished glass, creating a jarring contrast to the high-stakes execution prepared a few feet away. Back inside the boardroom, the silence was suffocating. Bradley wiped his damp palms against his cheap trousers, pulling out a stack of printed financial projections. His breathing was shallow and rapid. He tried to mentally rehearse his opening statement, but the sheer gravity of the room was actively scrambling his thoughts. He looked over at his boss, hoping for a shred of encouragement. Mr. Sterling was staring out the window, his jaw clenched tight. He turned to Bradley, his expression devoid of any warmth or patience. "Listen to me very carefully, Bradley." Mr. Sterling warned, his voice a sharp, dangerous whisper. "You have already embarrassed this firm once. You are sitting on a razor-thin line between keeping your career and being blacklisted from the industry. Do you understand me?" Bradley swallowed hard, nodding frantically. "Yes, sir, I understand completely. I have all the data ready. I know exactly how to pitch the synergy between our firm and Apex Lux." Mr. Sterling leaned in closer, his eyes piercing through Bradley. Fragile confidence. "You clearly do not understand the magnitude of the person we are about to meet," Mr. Sterling continued. "The CEO of Apex Lux is an absolute ghost in the financial sector. She shuns the press, avoids galas, and suffers no fools. She built this global empire from a single distressed property and crushed every male-dominated firm that tried to block her path. She is ruthless. She is brilliant. If she senses a single ounce of hesitation, a single flaw in your numbers, she will devour you alive and spit out the bones. You do not try to charm a woman like that. You give her hard, undeniable facts, or you get out of her building." The color completely drained from Bradley's face. The cheap, arrogant swagger he had displayed in the lobby downstairs had vanished completely. He was suddenly painfully aware of his own profound mediocrity. He looked down at his printed spreadsheets, suddenly terrified that his numbers were wrong. He frantically began recalculating his profit margins. His hands shaking so badly, he nearly dropped his pen. His entire life, his marriage to a demanding woman, and his standing in a family that worshipped his title hinged on this interaction with a billionaire he had never seen. Through the thick soundproof glass, Bradley could see his wife and mother-in-law. Chloe was now attempting to record a video for her social media followers. She was spinning around in the reception area, holding up her fake Hermes bag, speaking loudly into the camera about how her brilliant husband was currently closing a billion-dollar deal. Vivian was standing behind her, nodding proudly, posing as if she owned the entire resort. Bradley watched them, and a sudden sickening wave of dread washed over him. If he failed this meeting, he would not just lose his job. Chloe would leave him. The heavy debt would swallow them whole. He needed this CEO to be merciful. He needed her to look past his logistical failures and see potential. Mr. Sterling checked his heavy gold watch, tapping his finger against the obsidian table. "She is making us wait." Mr. Sterling noted his tone tight with anxiety. "It is a power play. She wants to see if we break under the pressure. Keep your posture straight." "Bradley, stop sweating. You look like a terrified child." Bradley quickly sat up, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. He rehearsed the first few lines of his apology in his head. He would blame the catering company for the ruined dinner party. He would explain how his firm could offer Apex Lux an unparalleled local network in Atlanta. He clung to the desperate delusion that he could manipulate this brilliant CEO exactly the way he manipulated his demanding mother-in-law. He glanced back out through the glass walls. Chloe had grown bored of taking selfies and was now actively harassing a passing receptionist. She snapped her manicured fingers loudly, demanding premium coffee and openly complaining about the service speed. The receptionist maintained a polite smile, but the disdain in her eyes was unmistakable. Bradley squeezed his eyes shut, praying the CEO would not walk through the reception area and witness his family behaving like feral tourists in a luxury sanctuary. The ticking of the sleek wall clock seemed to echo loudly in the vast, silent boardroom, amplifying his sheer panic. Every agonizing second that passed drained another drop of his fading courage. He gripped his pen until his knuckles turned white, desperately, hoping to survive the impending corporate slaughter. While Bradley remained trapped inside his glass cage of mounting despair, the atmosphere out in the reception area was deteriorating rapidly. Chloe had finally received her demanded cup of premium coffee, but she was far from satisfied. She tapped her foot against the polished marble floor, crossing and uncrossing her legs in a theatrical display of impatience. She was thoroughly annoyed that her status as the wife of an executive had not granted her immediate access to the inner sanctum. Vivian sat beside her, flipping through a high-end lifestyle magazine, occasionally sighing loudly to ensure the reception staff knew exactly how inconvenienced they were. The quiet hum of the reception area was suddenly interrupted by the steady, confident click of designer heels. A woman walked into the lounge, radiating an aura of absolute unapologetic authority. She was a strikingly beautiful, dark-skinned black woman in her late 30s, wearing a custom-tailored plum-colored crepe suit that draped flawlessly over her frame. Her natural hair was styled in an immaculate architectural updo, and she carried a stack of sleek black leather portfolios tucked under her arm. Everything about her, from the subtle gleam of her Cartier watch to the focused intensity of her gaze, projected supreme executive power. Chloe noticed her immediately, and her entire body tensed with an ugly, familiar resentment. Chloe had spent her entire life being conditioned by Vivian to believe that lighter skin and proximity to whiteness were the ultimate currency. To see a dark-skinned woman moving through an ultra-luxury corporate space with such inherent effortless dominance directly challenged the fragile hierarchy Chloe worshipped. Chloe's grip on her fake Hermes bag tightened. She felt an irrational, desperate need to put this woman in her place, to assert dominance over someone who clearly possessed the genuine status Chloe was merely pretending to have. As the executive walked gracefully across the reception area, checking a notification on her smartwatch, Chloe saw her opportunity. She stood up abruptly, deliberately, stepping directly into the woman's narrow path. Chloe swung her arm outward in a wide, exaggerated gesture, holding her hot coffee cup right in the collision zone. The impact was unavoidable. The heavy ceramic cup slammed against the executive forearm, sending a wave of dark, steaming coffee splashing across the immaculate plum crepe sleeve of her suit and splattering onto the pristine marble floor. A few drops landed on the edge of Chloe's fake designer bag. Instead of stepping back or offering a shred of a basic apology, Chloe immediately went on the offensive. She let out a piercing, dramatic gasp, throwing her hands up in the air as if she had just been violently attacked. "Watch exactly where you are going, you clumsy idiot!" Chloe shrieked, her voice cutting through the serene environment like a siren. "You just spilled scalding coffee all over my limited edition luxury bag. Do you have any idea how much this costs? You people are completely incompetent and entirely useless." The executive did not flinch. She did not drop her leather portfolios. She simply looked down at the dark brown stains soaking into the sleeve of her expensive bespoke suit, and then slowly raised her eyes to meet Chloe. Furious gaze. Her expression was completely devoid of panic or submission. It was cold, calculating, and dangerously calm. Vivian immediately abandoned her magazine and rushed to her daughter's defense, stepping right up to the executive. "What is wrong with you?" Vivian snapped, pointing a manicured finger aggressively at the woman. "You need to look where you are walking. You hospitality workers think you can just rush around blindly while VIP guests are trying to relax. We are waiting for the CEO of this entire corporation, and my son-in-law is about to close a massive deal here. I want your manager out here right this second. You need to pay for the damage to my daughter's expensive bag, and then you need to get down on your knees and clean up this mess you made on the floor." The receptionist sitting behind the nearby desk gasped, jumping to her feet in sheer horror. She opened her mouth to intervene, to desperately explain to these two screaming tourists exactly who they were insulting. But the executive silenced the receptionist with a single sharp raise of her hand. The reception area fell dead silent except for the sound of Chloe's indignant huffing. "You are the help," Chloe spat out, crossing her arms and sticking out her chin. "You are paid to serve us and stay out of our way. Now go grab a towel and wipe up this coffee before someone important slips on it, and you better pray I do not report you to human resources." The executive maintained her lethal silence. She reached into her pocket, producing a pristine white linen handkerchief. She meticulously dabbed the spilled coffee from her plum sleeve, moving with a slow, deliberate grace that made Chloe angry. Demands feel entirely insignificant. She did not offer a single word of apology. She did not scramble for a towel to clean the floor. She simply finished wiping her sleeve, folded the handkerchief, and looked Vivian and Chloe directly in the eyes. The sheer intensity of her silent stare was paralyzing. It was a look that stripped away their fake designer clothes and their borrowed corporate arrogance, exposing them as the cheap, pathetic frauds they truly were. Vivian took a sudden, involuntary step backward, intimidated by the crushing weight of the woman. Unapologetic dominance, Chloe opened her mouth to hurl another insult, but the words died in her throat as the executive turned her back on them, completely dismissing their entire existence. Without uttering a single syllable, the executive walked straight past the trembling reception desk. She approached the massive, heavy mahogany doors that led directly into the primary boardroom where Bradley and Mr. Sterling were waiting. Those doors were guarded by biometric scanners and restricted to the highest level of corporate clearance. The executive did not knock. She simply pressed her thumb against the scanner. The light flashed green and the heavy doors clicked unlocked. Chloe and Vivian watched in stunned silence as the woman pushed open the heavy doors and walked directly into the CEO private sanctuary, the very room Bradley was currently sweating inside. The thick doors swung shut behind her, sealing with a solid, terrifying thud. "Who does she think she is?" Chloe muttered, her voice shaking slightly as a deep, sickening knot of realization began to form in her stomach. Why did she just walk in there? Vivian swallowed hard, clutching her diamond cross pendant. Her church, lady arrogance rapidly giving way to a creeping sense of absolute dread. "She was not a maid, Chloe," Vivian whispered. "She was not the help." They were standing in the lobby, unaware they had brutally insulted the chief of staff for Apex Lux. They hurled classist insults at my most trusted advisor, my right-hand woman, who was currently holding the financial audit about to end Bradley's career permanently. The executioner had entered the room, and they handed her the axe. Inside the glass-walled boardroom, the oppressive silence was suddenly broken by the heavy thud of the mahogany doors sealing shut. Bradley practically jumped in his seat, his heart hammering against his ribs, as the striking woman in the plum-colored crepe suit walked past them. He did not notice the fresh, dark coffee stain rapidly setting into the expensive fabric of her sleeve, and he certainly did not know that his own wife had just brutally insulted her out in the lobby. She simply walked straight toward the final set of frosted glass doors that guarded the CEO private inner office. She tapped her smartwatch against a hidden sensor and slipped inside, leaving the two men waiting in agonizing suspense. Mr. Sterling wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead, a rare display of nerves from a man who usually commanded every room he entered. He looked at Bradley, his eyes narrowing into cold, unforgiving slits. That was the chief of staff. Mr. Sterling whispered, his voice tight with severe anxiety. "She is the absolute gatekeeper to the throne. If she is moving with that kind of urgency, it means the CEO is ready for us right now. Get your materials together, Bradley. Do not drop anything. Do not stammer. Speak only. When spoken to, and for the love of God, do not try to make your usual arrogant small talk." Bradley fumbled with his leather portfolio, his hands slick with cold sweat. He gathered his printed financial spreadsheets, desperately trying to organize them into a cohesive pitch. His mind was racing wildly, cycling through the catastrophic dinner party, the maxed-out corporate credit card, and the absolute crushing necessity of securing this merger. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, taking a shallow, shaky breath. He needed to channel the arrogant swagger he usually reserved for his mother-in-law, Vivian. He needed to project the image of a highly successful executive, a master of the universe who deserved a guaranteed seat at the absolute apex of the corporate world. The frosted glass doors glided open with a soft mechanical hiss. The chief of staff stepped back into the doorway, her face a perfectly sculpted mask of professional indifference. She looked directly at Mr. Sterling and then shifted her sharp, lethal gaze to Bradley. "The CEO will see you now," she announced, her voice echoing softly in the cavernous space. Bradley stood up quickly, nearly knocking his heavy leather chair backward. He forcefully yanked down the hem of his cheap suit jacket, puffing out his chest to its maximum capacity. He pasted on his most winning, charismatic smile, the exact same smile he used to manipulate Chloe and charm Vivian into funding his luxurious lifestyle. He believed completely in his own fabricated charm. He walked closely behind Mr. Sterling, stepping over the polished threshold into the inner sanctum of the Apex Lux Empire. The atmosphere inside the primary executive suite was instantly suffocating. It was masterfully designed to psychologically dismantle anyone who dared to walk through those heavy doors. The sheer scale of the modern architecture was overwhelming to the senses. Vast expanses of dark polished obsidian lined the walls, absorbing the light and creating a stark, intimidating contrast to the brilliant Florida sunshine, pouring fiercely through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. There were no family photographs, no personal touches, and no cheap distractions. The only artwork was a single abstract painting in deep crimson and charcoal, hanging ominously behind a sprawling custom-built desk carved from a single slab of petrified wood. The air smelled of expensive leather, sharp citrus, and absolute unyielding power. It was a space built not for friendly negotiation, but for ruthless corporate execution. Bradley felt his carefully constructed confidence begin to immediately evaporate under the crushing weight of the environment. He suddenly felt entirely out of his depth, a small, insignificant fish swimming directly into the jaws of a massive leviathan. At the far end of the sprawling office, positioned squarely in front of the sweeping panoramic ocean view, sat a massive high-backed executive chair, upholstered in flawless black Italian leather. The chair was turned completely away from the door, facing the roaring Atlantic waves. The CEO was seated inside, offering them absolutely nothing but the imposing dark silhouette of the tall leather back. It was the ultimate display of untouchable dominance. The billionaire founder of Apex Lux did not even bother to turn around to greet them. Mr. Sterling stopped a respectful distance from the desk, bowing his head slightly, even though the CEO could not see him. Bradley, however, was running purely on desperate adrenaline and severely misplaced arrogance. He saw the turned chair not as a warning, but as a golden opportunity to seize control of the narrative. He stepped forward, bypassing Mr. Sterling entirely, and marched right up to the edge of the petrified wood desk. He puffed his chest out even further, projecting his voice to fill the cavernous executive suite. "Good morning," he boomed, plastering his fake charismatic smile across his face. "My name is Bradley, and I am the regional director representing our commercial real estate division. My commercial real estate firm offers an unparalleled synergy with the Apex Lux portfolio. I have personally overseen the logistical projections for this merger, and I can assure you that bringing my team on board will be the most lucrative decision you make this quarter. We are now fully prepared to elevate your vast holdings across the entire southeastern seaboard." Bradley placed his hands flat on the desk, leaning forward in what he assumed was a powerful, dominant posture. He waited for the billionaire to swivel around, awed by his incredible confidence and ready to hand him the promotion that would ultimately save his miserable life. He stood there smiling blindly at the back of the heavy leather chair, completely ignorant of the absolute total annihilation waiting for him on the other side. The echo of Bradley's booming voice hit the acoustic panels of the cavernous office and died instantly, leaving no trace of his forced authority behind. He stood leaning forward with his palms pressed flat against the petrified wood desk, maintaining his artificially bright smile. He fully expected the anonymous billionaire to be immediately charmed by his assertive masculine energy. He expected a warm chuckle, a firm handshake, and an immediate offer to discuss the merger over expensive imported cigars. He believed his tailored pitch would instantly secure his promotion and elevate his family status to the highest echelon of the commercial real estate world. Instead, the room plunged into an absolute suffocating silence. Mr. Sterling, who had remained standing a respectful distance away, closed his eyes in sheer, unfiltered agony. He recognized the monumental error his subordinate had just committed. You do not barge into the inner sanctum of a global industry. Tighten and bark your rehearsed sales pitch at the back of their head. Mr. Sterling took a slow, terrified step backward, physically distancing himself from Bradley and the impending corporate slaughter. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The heavy, high-backed black Italian leather chair remained perfectly motionless for several agonizing seconds. The billionaire was letting Bradley sweat, letting the profound, heavy silence crush the remaining oxygen out of his lungs. Bradley's fake smile began to tremble at the edges. His palms left damp, sweaty handprints on the polished wood surface. He opened his mouth to speak again to fill the terrifying void with more hollow corporate jargon, but the chair finally began to move. It turned with a slow, deliberate, mechanical precision. The smooth, silent rotation felt incredibly dramatic, like an apex predator slowly turning its gaze toward a trapped, helpless prey. Bradley stood up slightly straighter, adjusting his cheap tie and gripping the edges of his leather portfolio. He prepared his face to reflect the utmost professional respect, ready to lock eyes with the ruthless visionary who held his entire livelihood in their hands. He held his breath, preparing to conquer the corporate world. The chair completed its rotation, stopping with a soft, definitive thud. The person sitting in the seat of absolute, undisputed power did not look like the older white male corporate shark Bradley had spent weeks imagining. The person sitting behind the massive desk was wearing an immaculate, bespoke ivory power suit crafted with lethal precision. A deep crimson silk blouse peeked out from the sharp lapels, offering a stark, striking contrast. The woman sat with her legs elegantly crossed, her posture radiating a terrifying, unyielding authority. Her dark skin glowed flawlessly under the ambient lighting of the executive suite. Her hair was styled in an architectural masterpiece of quiet elegance. She rested her hands on the armrests, her manicured fingers perfectly still, her eyes cold, calculated, and fiercely intelligent, locked directly onto Bradley's terrified face. It was Nia, the same dark-skinned woman he had insulted in her mother kitchen just 24 hours ago. The same woman he had ordered to scrub floors and stay hidden in the basement because she was an embarrassment to his fragile social climbing aspirations. The same woman he had mocked in the resort lobby less than an hour ago, telling her to crawl back to a budget motel. Bradley stared. He blinked once, twice, shaking his head slightly as if trying to physically dislodge a vivid hallucination. His brain completely short-circuited. The cognitive dissonance was so absolute, so violently jarring, that he literally forgot how to breathe. He stared at the custom-tailored suit, at the luxury watch gleaming on her wrist, at the massive petrified wood desk, and back to her familiar face. The visual data entering his eyes refused to align with the pathetic, subservient narrative he and Chloe had constructed for her entire life. This was not the spinster sister who worked a low-level desk job. This was not the bitter, jealous relative trying to ruin his vacation. This was the founder, the majority shareholder, the untouchable ghost of the commercial real estate world. This was the billionaire mogul. Mr. Sterling let out a sharp, trembling breath, completely unaware of the familial connection between the two people facing each other. He only saw his regional director staring, slack-jawed and silent at the most powerful woman in their industry. Mr. Sterling desperately tried to intervene to salvage the horrific introduction. Bradley apologized for the intrusion. Mr. Sterling stammered, bowing his head respectfully toward the desk. Please excuse his forwardness. CEO, Washington. We are deeply honored that you granted us this time. Bradley did not hear a single word his boss said. The corporate facade he had spent years perfecting evaporated into thin air, leaving behind a terrified, highly confused man-child. He took a stumbling step back from the desk, his knees buckling slightly. The color rushed out of his face, leaving him a sickly pale gray. His jaw hung open, his eyes wide with unadulterated panic. He looked around the massive executive suite, searching for some rational explanation, for some hidden camera or indication that this was a bizarre, elaborate prank. But there were no cameras. There was only the heavy, crushing reality of his impending doom. Nia, Bradley gasped, his voice cracking, completely stripped of its booming arrogance. What? He swallowed hard, struggling to form basic words. The air in his lungs felt like broken glass. He pointed a shaking finger toward the leather chair. Nia, what the hell are you doing in the CEO chair? Mr. Sterling turned to Bradley with a look of pure homicidal rage. Bradley, have you lost your mind? Mr. Sterling hissed violently, grabbing Bradley by the arm. You address her as Madam CEO, or you shut your mouth right now. I remained perfectly still, letting him drown in his own profound confusion. I did not break eye contact. I watched the arrogant swagger bleed completely out of his body. I watched the exact moment his fragile ego shattered against the impenetrable wall of my success. He was staring at the woman he had commanded to cook his lamb dinner, realizing she owned the very ground he was currently trembling on. The power dynamic had violently, irreversibly shifted. I leaned forward slightly, resting my forearms on the dark surface of my desk. I let a slow, sharp smile spread across my face, a smile that contained absolutely zero warmth or forgiveness. "Welcome to Apex Lux." "Bradley," I replied, my voice echoing smoothly across the cavernous room. Rich, calm, and utterly lethal. "The chief of staff." The same woman Chloe had intentionally spilled coffee on out in the lobby walked silently through the frosted glass doors. She took her rightful place, standing at strict attention right beside my chair. She placed a thick black dossier onto my desk, right in front of me. The dossier contained every single financial record, every corporate mistake, and every damning secret Bradley had tried to bury. The trap was locked. The execution was ready to commence. Bradley stared at the thick black dossier resting on the polished surface of the petrified wood desk, unable to comprehend the sheer magnitude of his impending destruction. The chief of staff stood impeccably straight beside my high-backed leather chair. Her presence alone was a massive physical manifestation of his imminent doom. The dark brown coffee stain was still starkly visible on the sleeve of her bespoke plum-colored crepe suit, a permanent glaring reminder of the classist vile insults Chloe and Vivian had hurled at her just minutes ago in the pristine reception lounge. She did not say a single word to Bradley. She simply glared at him with a look of absolute concentrated disdain that made him physically recoil. His mind desperately tried to process how the woman his wife had just degraded as the help was actually the gatekeeper to a billionaire empire. Mr. Sterling finally found his voice breaking the suffocating, silent tension that had completely consumed the executive suite. He took a hesitant step forward, keeping a deliberate, safe distance from Bradley, as if sheer incompetence was a highly contagious disease. "Madam CEO," Mr. Sterling began his voice, entirely stripped of its usual booming corporate authority. "I sincerely apologize for whatever complicated history exists between you and my regional director. I was entirely unaware of any familial connection prior to stepping into this room. We came here today in good faith to present a mutually beneficial acquisition strategy. I respectfully beg you to not let his unprofessional outburst reflect on the integrity of our entire firm." I did not look at Mr. Sterling. My dark gaze remained entirely locked on Bradley, who was currently vibrating with cold, unfiltered terror. He was clutching his cheap leather portfolio against his chest like a useless plastic shield. "Family connection." I asked, my voice smooth, flat, and perfectly calm. "I have no family standing in this room." "Mr. Sterling." The trembling man in front of my desk is simply an underperforming, mid-level manager who arrived at my flagship property uninvited, demanding an audience. He absolutely has not earned. He claimed he had unparalleled synergy to offer my corporate empire. I am simply giving him the floor to prove his worth right now. I opened the thick black dossier, flipping past the title page with slow, deliberate precision. The crisp sound of the heavy paper turning echoed sharply across the obsidian walls. Bradley swallowed hard, his eyes darting frantically between my face and the damning file resting under my manicured fingertips. "You boldly stated that your commercial real estate division is fully prepared to elevate the Apex Lux portfolio across the southeastern seaboard," I said, leaning back slightly into my plush leather chair. "Let us examine that highly audacious claim, Bradley. According to your firm internal quarterly reports, which my elite acquisition team bypassed your firewalls to access, last week your regional division failed to meet its basic baseline revenue targets for 3 consecutive quarters. You missed your third quarter projections by a staggering 14%, representing a net loss of nearly $7 million. Bradley opened his mouth to formulate an excuse, but the words completely failed to materialize. His face turned a mottled, ugly shade of red as the brutal, undeniable facts stripped away his fake, arrogant facade. Your primary expansion strategy hinges entirely on securing outdated commercial strip properties and attempting to flip them into mixed-use residential developments. I continued reading directly from the forensic financial audit prepared by my team. However, you severely failed to account for the skyrocketing supply chain costs and the recent aggressive zoning restrictions implemented across the greater Atlanta area. Your cost analysis for the highly publicized Midtown project is undervalued by roughly $2.5 million. If Apex Lux were foolish enough to merge with your specific department, we would immediately inherit a bloated, grossly mismanaged portfolio, bleeding massive amounts of capital on a daily basis. Mr. Sterling whipped his head around to stare at Bradley, his eyes widening in pure, unadulterated horror. $2.5 million. Mr. Sterling hissed through tightly clenched teeth. Bradley, you explicitly assured me those municipal zoning permits were completely finalized. You submitted a signed internal corporate guarantee, stating the Midtown project was currently operating well under budget. Bradley's hands shook violently as he dropped his leather portfolio onto the floor. The sound was pathetic, a dull, embarrassing slap against the polished marble. He scrambled frantically to pick up his scattered spreadsheets, his cheap suit wrinkling as he bent down. Sir, I can explain, Bradley stammered, his voice pitching upward in sheer panic. The city zoning board unexpectedly delayed the hearing. It was completely out of my control. I was going to update the financial projections next week. I just needed to secure this merger first to offset the temporary capital losses. You intentionally falsified internal financial documents to hide your massive logistical failures from your own executive superiors, I stated, setting the dossier down and folding my hands together, resting them on the desk. You built a fragile house of cards. Bradley and you had the supreme unearned arrogance to walk into my corporate sanctuary and offer it to me as a premium valuable asset. You lack basic fundamental industry knowledge. You lack crucial financial foresight. And most importantly, you lack absolute professional integrity. I turned my attention to Mr. Sterling, who was currently gripping the back of a leather guest chair, looking as though he might physically collapse from the sheer crushing embarrassment of the disastrous situation. Mr. Sterling, I expect total transparency and flawless execution from any firm actively seeking a highly lucrative partnership with Apex Lux. You brought a severely underqualified man into my boardroom who cannot even accurately calculate basic municipal construction costs. He relies entirely on false charm and fabricated confidence to mask his profound, deep-rooted, pathetic mediocrity. He embodies the exact type of toxic corporate liability I actively seek out and permanently destroy here today. Bradley scrambled to gather his spilled spreadsheets, his breathing ragged. Madam CEO, he choked out, abandoning his false dignity. Please, I can fix this. I just need a grace period to restructure the portfolio. My team is highly capable. I am a dedicated family man. I work around the clock to provide for my wife. I did not offer him a single ounce of pity. I looked at the pathetic, sweating man who had spent years allowing his wife to hurl colorist insults at me, the man who gladly accepted my mother's toxic worship while treating me like dirt. He was invoking his status as a family man, using Chloe as a shield to beg for professional mercy. The audacity of his plea was almost laughable. I raised my hand, silencing his frantic rambling instantly. I turned to my chief of staff. She stepped forward, her face still an impassive mask of professional execution, and flipped to the final section of the thick black dossier. A series of highlighted bank statements and itemized expense reports lay exposed under the bright lighting. A dedicated family man, I repeated, letting the words roll off my tongue with icy precision. That is a fascinating defense, Bradley. However, my elite forensic accounting team did not just stop at uncovering your disastrous municipal zoning failures. When I targeted your specific regional branch for a potential acquisition, I ordered a microscopic audit of executive expenditures. I wanted to ensure the leadership team I was acquiring operated with flawless integrity. I leaned forward, pressing my manicured fingertips against the obsidian surface of my desk. Your corporate expense accounts reveal a disturbing pattern of gross financial misconduct, I stated, my voice echoing coldly across the room. Let us discuss the second weekend of last month. You informed your firm and your wife that you were attending a commercial real estate summit in Chicago. You requested a massive increase on your corporate credit limit to cover supposedly critical networking dinners. Bradley's face transformed from pale gray to a sickening translucent white. According to the flight manifests and luxury hotel receipts my team pulled, I continued unyielding. You did not fly to Chicago. You flew directly to Las Vegas. You used exactly $22,400 of company funds to book a premium penthouse suite at the Bellagio Secure VIP bottle service and purchase expensive designer jewelry. I paused, letting the crushing weight of the exact numbers hang in the heavy air. And you certainly did not do this networking with real estate clients. You spent the entire weekend with a 24-year-old cocktail waitress named Jessica. I have the flight records, the room service signatures, and the security footage timestamps all perfectly cataloged right here. The silence in the boardroom became absolute. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock. Bradley looked as though he had been violently struck by a train. His mouth hung open, but his vocal cords were completely paralyzed. The arrogant executive who had demanded I scrub his mother-in-law's hardwood floors just hours ago was now completely stripped of his armor, standing totally naked in his fraud. Mr. Sterling let out a sound that was half gasp, half furious growl. He stepped away from Bradley as if the man was actively on fire. You charged a weekend with your mistress to the corporate account, Mr. Sterling shouted, losing his polished executive composure. You used company funds to finance your illicit affairs while telling me you were securing critical client relations in Chicago. Bradley slowly turned his head toward his boss, his eyes wide with wild terror. Sir, I swear it was a temporary lapse in judgment. Bradley begged, his voice cracking into a pathetic whine. I was going to pay the company back quietly. Please, you cannot let this ruin my entire career. I will do whatever it takes to fix this. I shifted my gaze directly to Mr. Sterling, bypassing Bradley entirely. Mr. Sterling, I said, my tone absolute and lethal. Apex Lux is a global hospitality empire built on unparalleled trust, uncompromising excellence, and rigorous ethical standards. I demand absolute perfection from my executive board. I gestured toward the trembling, sweating mess of a man standing before my desk. I do not merge my empire with companies that harbor fraudsters. I do not sign billion-dollar checks to firms that allow their regional directors to embezzle corporate funds for cheap weekend affairs. If he remains employed by your firm for one more minute, this acquisition is permanently dead, and I will personally ensure that every major player in this industry knows exactly why. Mr. Sterling did not hesitate for a single fraction of a second. The survival of his multi-million-dollar corporate deal, his own professional reputation, and the future of his entire firm were all resting squarely on a razor-thin edge. He turned to Bradley, his face contorted into a mask of pure, unbridled corporate wrath. You are fired, Mr. Sterling roared, his voice echoing violently off the thick glass walls. Effective immediately, you are stripped of your title and your regional authority. You do not represent this firm, and you will never work in commercial real estate again. Bradley collapsed to his knees, the expensive fabric of his trousers hitting the marble floor with a heavy, defeated thud. Please, Bradley sobbed, large tears spilling down his flushed, sweaty face. My wife is waiting outside. I have massive credit card debt. If I lose this job, Chloe will leave me. We will lose everything. Hand over your corporate phone and your company credit card right now, Mr. Sterling demanded, ignoring Bradley's pathetic tears entirely. Our legal department will seek full financial restitution for the embezzled funds. If you do not pay back every single stolen cent, we will press felony fraud charges and you will go to federal prison. With shaking, clumsy fingers, Bradley reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out the corporate smartphone and the heavy metal credit card, handing them up to Mr. Sterling like a broken prisoner surrendering his weapons. He remained on his knees in front of my petrified wood desk, stripped of his leverage, his pride, and his entire identity. He was absolutely nothing. I watched him weeping on my floor, feeling the magnificent weight of ultimate justice. The heavy mahogany doors to the executive boardroom suddenly burst open, shattering the tense atmosphere of the corporate execution into a million jagged pieces. The violent intrusion was fueled by the sheer panic radiating from the reception area outside. Hearing Mr. Sterling shouting about embezzlement and federal prison, Vivian and Chloe had abandoned all pretense of high society elegance. They shoved past the protesting security personnel, their expensive heels skidding awkwardly against the polished obsidian floors. They stormed into the inner sanctum fully prepared to aggressively defend their fragile golden ticket against whatever corporate injustice was occurring. Instead, they slammed into a solid brick wall of incomprehensible reality. They froze just a few feet past the threshold, their manicured hands dropping limply to their sides. The scene before them completely defied human logic. Bradley, the man they treated as the absolute pinnacle of white-collar success, was currently hyperventilating on his knees on the cold marble floor. His face was buried deep in his hands, his shoulders heaving with loud, pathetic sobs. Mr. Sterling stood directly over him, clutching Bradley's confiscated corporate smartphone and platinum credit card, radiating pure, untempered disgust. Chloe let out a strangled, terrified gasp. She rushed forward, dropping her counterfeit Hermes bag onto the immaculate floor, and grabbed her husband by his wrinkled suit shoulders. "Bradley, what is happening?" Chloe shrieked, her voice echoing wildly in the acoustically perfect room. "Why are you on the floor? Get up. You have a meeting with the CEO." Bradley could not even look at her. He simply shook his head, burying his face deeper into his sweaty palms, utterly broken. Vivian, however, looked past the weeping man on the floor. Her eyes traveled upward past the sleek, petrified wood desk and finally locked onto the high-backed Italian leather chair. Her breath hitched violently in her throat. Sitting there draped in a flawless, bespoke ivory power suit, projecting absolute, terrifying authority, was the dark-skinned daughter she had ordered to scrub the kitchen floors yesterday. Vivian's brain violently rejected the visual information. She refused to accept that her ultimate scapegoat was currently occupying the throne of a billionaire empire. In a desperate, delusional attempt to reclaim her rapidly evaporating matriarchal power, Vivian marched forward, her face twisting into a mask of righteous fury. "Nia Washington." Vivian snapped, her voice vibrating with toxic maternal rage. "What kind of sick, twisted prank is this? Get out of that chair this instant. You are trespassing in a highly restricted corporate office. You have humiliated your brother-in-law enough for one lifetime. I will not let you ruin his entire career by playing dress-up in the CEO office. Security is going to arrive and arrest you." I remained perfectly motionless in the plush leather seat. I did not flinch at her screeching commands. I simply looked at her, observing the desperate flailing death throes of her fake church lady persona. Mr. Sterling and my chief of staff watched in stunned silence, witnessing the horrific family dynamic that had plagued my entire existence unfold right in the middle of a massive corporate acquisition. I did not offer my mother a single syllable of explanation. Instead, I reached out my manicured hand and gracefully pressed a sleek silver button embedded in the control console on my desk. Instantly, the state-of-the-art, high-fidelity surround sound, speakers hidden seamlessly within the obsidian walls crackled to life. The audio was crystal clear, perfectly preserving the ambient sound of the rushing indoor waterfall from the resort lobby downstairs. Then Vivian's own voice filled the vast executive boardroom, amplified and inescapable. "Look at you!" The recorded voice of my mother sneered from the ceiling speakers, dripping with unfiltered toxic malice. "You are a dark-skinned, hard-faced woman with absolutely no charm. You have no husband. You have no children. You spend your holidays entirely alone because you are fundamentally unlovable." Vivian physically recoiled, her hands flying up to cover her mouth in absolute paralyzing horror. The color completely drained from her face, leaving her looking like a terrified ghost. Mr. Sterling's jaw dropped, deeply disturbed by the visceral cruelty echoing through the room. The audio continued, relentless and brutal. "Bradley is the best thing that ever happened to this family," the recording declared. "He is a successful white man who chose your sister. He elevated our status, and instead of falling to your knees and thanking God that He allows you to sit at our dinner table, you try to humiliate Him just because you are consumed by your own pathetic, ugly jealousy. I pressed the silver button again, stopping the playback abruptly. The silence that followed was heavier than concrete. The horrific truth of the family dynamic hung suspended in the corporate office, exposing Vivian not as a pious, loving matriarch, but as a vicious colorist abuser. She stood completely paralyzed, her eyes darting wildly for an exit that did not exist. There was no religious facade left to hide behind. Every single person in the room now knew exactly what kind of monster she truly was. Meanwhile, on the floor, Chloe was violently shaking her husband. "Bradley, tell me what is going on," she demanded, hysteria bleeding into her voice. Mr. Sterling looked down at her with cold, unfiltered contempt. "Your husband is fired," Mr. Sterling stated brutally. He embezzled $22,000 of company funds to spend a weekend in Las Vegas with a 24-year-old cocktail waitress. He is a fraud, and he is entirely cut off from this firm. The words struck Chloe like a physical blow. Her hands dropped from Bradley's shoulders. The devastating reality crashed down on her all at once. Her pristine, high-society luxury lifestyle was completely funded by stolen money. The white knight husband she believed elevated her status was an unemployed, cheating fraudster who was about to face federal prison. Her financial safety net was entirely obliterated in a matter of seconds. Her designer dreams evaporated completely. She looked up from the weeping man on the floor and stared directly at me, sitting powerfully in my ivory suit. She finally realized that the dark-skinned sister she had constantly mocked and degraded was the only person in the room holding absolute untouchable power. The entire fraudulent empire they had built together was burning to the ground, and I was holding the match. I looked down at the pathetic triad assembled on my obsidian floor. The absolute shock radiating from Chloe and Vivian filled the room. "Mother, you told me I was unlovable," I said. "You told me my dark skin was a burden, yet here I sit, owning the ground you are trespassing on." I reached across the desk and pressed the intercom button. "Security?" I stated calmly. "I have 3 trespassers in the boardroom. I need them escorted off the property immediately. Ensure they are permanently blacklisted from every Apex Lux resort globally." Vivian snapped out of her paralyzed state, pleading, "Nia, please, you cannot do this to your own mother. We are family. I made a mistake. We can go to counseling. We can pray on this." "There is no prayer that can fix the rot inside you," I replied. "You prayed for my downfall while demanding I scrub your floors. You worshipped a fraudulent man simply because he was white, ignoring your brilliant daughter. Your god is money, Vivian, and unfortunately for you, I am the one who controls the bank for." Large security guards materialized through the heavy mahogany doors almost instantly. They moved with swift, silent efficiency, pulling a weeping, hyperventilating Bradley off the floor. Chloe screamed, kicking her discounted heels against the marble as a guard firmly gripped her arm. "Let me go!" Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking hysterically. "My bag, my Hermes bag is on the floor. Get it for me." The lead guard looked at me for instruction. I offered a cold, dismissive wave of my hand. "Let her keep the fake bag," I instructed. "She will need something to hold her tears when the collection agencies come knocking tomorrow morning." The guards dragged them out of the executive suite. Vivian was wailing loud theatrical sobs, begging for a second chance that would never come. Bradley was completely limp, a broken shell being carried away to face federal fraud charges. The heavy mahogany doors slammed shut behind them, sealing the room in a pristine, beautiful silence. I let out a long, slow, deep breath, feeling the toxic weight permanently lift from my shoulders. I stood up and walked over to the sleek mahogany wet bar tucked into the corner. I poured myself a large glass of an exceptionally rare vintage red wine. I walked gracefully toward the massive floor-to-ceiling windows that completely overlooked the grand main entrance of the luxury resort. Outside, the bright Florida morning had rapidly given way to a violent torrential tropical downpour. The sky was a bruised, angry purple, unleashing sheets of heavy rain against the pavement. Down below, the security guards shoved the trio out of the sliding glass doors directly into the unforgiving storm. Their cheap luggage was tossed unceremoniously onto the wet curb right beside them. They were left completely exposed to the harsh natural elements. I took a slow sip of my wine, watching the scene unfold from my penthouse fortress. Vivian was attempting to shield her ruined designer knit suit with her purse. Chloe was screaming violently at Bradley, hitting his chest with her fists, furious that he squandered her luxurious lifestyle. Bradley just stood there in the pouring rain, ignoring his hysterical wife, staring blankly as his entire life disintegrated. The perfect high society family was fighting like feral animals in the mud, completely stripped of their fake prestige. They had tried to bury me, but completely failed. I turned away, leaving them to drown in the shallow puddles of their own making. The storm outside was fierce, but inside my empire, the atmosphere was serene and absolutely secure. I walked back toward the center of the boardroom, my heels clicking confidently against the stone floor. Mr. Sterling was still standing near the guest chairs, looking slightly pale but deeply respectful. He had witnessed a massacre, and he knew exactly who wielded the power in this room. My chief of staff, the brilliant, flawless woman who endured Chloe. Disgusting racist entitlement, stepped forward. She handed me a fresh, immaculate tablet displaying the merger documents, her dark skin glowing beautifully. We slowly exchanged a very deep, knowing, silent look of absolute sisterly solidarity. She was my chosen family now, a remarkable woman who commanded deep respect through sheer intellect and unwavering loyalty. I took the electronic tablet from her hands and smiled with a genuine warm expression. "Shall we get back to business, Mr. Sterling?" I asked, my voice ringing with renewed vibrant energy. "I believe we currently have a highly lucrative commercial acquisition to successfully finalize, assuming your firm is fully ready." Mr. Sterling nodded vigorously, straightening his tie and quickly taking his seat at the obsidian table. "Absolutely, Madam CEO," he replied, his tone laced with utmost reverence. "We are completely and utterly at your absolute full disposal today." I sat back down in my high-backed leather chair, claiming my rightful place at the absolute pinnacle of my empire. I had severed the diseased branches of my family tree, ensuring they could never poison my soil again. I was no longer the invisible dark-skinned maid confined to the basement. I was the architect of my own destiny, a mogul surrounded by loyalty, power, and unapologetic brilliance. Never let anyone force you into a lesser role simply because you do not fit their narrow, toxic definition of perfection. Sometimes the people who share your blood are the very ones trying to bleed you dry. Have you ever had to walk away from toxic family members to protect your own peace and build your own empire? How did you find the courage to finally cut them off and reclaim your power? Share your stories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey of ultimate karma and corporate justice, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about claiming your worth. Remember, your success is the loudest, most devastating response you can ever give to those who doubted you. The story of Nia teaches us that true power lies in silent resilience and unwavering inner worth. When toxic family members try to diminish your value based on superficial metrics like skin tone or marital status, your greatest weapon is your own success. Nia proved that you do not need to scream to be heard. Building an independent empire speaks volumes. Blood relations do not guarantee loyalty or love, and walking away from abuse is never a failure, but a profound act of personal protection. Do not let others dictate your narrative. Reclaim your power, establish firm boundaries, and subscribe.